He only wanted a place to sleep, but 3 Apache widows had an idea of making him their husband. James Carter had been walking for what felt like an eternity. The sun had beaten down on him relentlessly, burning his skin and making each step feel heavier than the last. Dust clung to his clothes, his shoes were worn through, and his water bottle was empty. The desert stretched endlessly around him, a vast, golden ocean with no signs of life except for the occasional cactus or distant rock formation. He had been traveling for days, moving from town to town, trying to find work, a meal, or at the very least, a safe place to rest for the night. But tonight, all he wanted was somewhere to lay his head, even if it was just a corner of someone's hut. The sky above him was a deep orange, signaling that the sun would soon dip below the horizon. Shadows grew long, stretching across the sand, and James realized that if he did not find shelter soon, he would have to sleep under the open sky. The thought made him uneasy. The desert nights were cold and unforgiving, and while he had survived sleeping outside before, he had learned the hard way that danger often crept in when one was most vulnerable. After what felt like hours of wandering, he spotted a faint trail leading toward a cluster of small huts built against the base of a cliff. The buildings looked old but sturdy, made of sun-baked clay and wood, with smoke rising from a single chimney. As he approached, he noticed a few figures moving between the huts. They seemed to pause occasionally, watching him. He slowed his pace, not wanting to alarm them. James knew from experience that strangers were rarely welcomed easily, especially in places where visitors were rare. One hut in particular caught his attention. A faint light flickered from inside, and a soft sound of humming floated through the air. He hesitated for a moment, then walked up and knocked gently. The door opened, and he was met by a woman who appeared to be in her late 30s. Her eyes were sharp, yet there was a warmth in her gaze that immediately put him at ease. She introduced herself as Maya. James explained that he was a traveler and needed a place to rest for the night. Maya looked at him carefully, as if assessing whether he was trustworthy. After a few moments, she nodded and stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. The interior of the hut was simple but welcoming. A small fire burned in the corner, casting a warm glow over the room. There were a few handmade rugs on the floor, some simple wooden furniture, and shelves lined with jars and small trinkets. The smell of herbs and cooked food lingered in the air. "You can stay here tonight," Maya said, her voice calm and firm. "We don't have much, but you will be safe." James thanked her sincerely. He had expected perhaps a cold stare or a curt refusal, but instead, he was met with kindness. As he settled down near the fire, he noticed 2 other women quietly observing from the shadows. They introduced themselves as Lena and Taya. They were also widows like Maya, and they shared the small space, living together in the hut. Their curiosity about James was clear, but they were polite, allowing him to make himself comfortable while they continued with their evening tasks. James could feel the exhaustion taking over his body. Every muscle ached, and his eyelids felt heavy. Yet, as he looked at the women, he realized this was more than just a chance encounter. There was something different about them, something resilient and quietly commanding. He felt a strange sense of safety despite being in a place so unfamiliar. As night fell, the women offered him a simple meal of roasted vegetables and a small piece of bread. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, grateful for the warmth of the fire and the quiet companionship. Conversation was minimal at first, with the women speaking among themselves in their native language. James listened intently, trying to catch familiar words. Even though he could not understand everything, he appreciated the melody and rhythm of their speech, the way it filled the room with life. After the meal, the 3 women left him to rest while they tidied the hut. James lay on a modest mat, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his journey, the countless towns he had passed through, the strangers he had met, and the countless nights he had slept under the stars. Never before had he been offered such unconditional kindness by people he barely knew. It made him reflect on the unpredictability of life, how sometimes the smallest gestures could have the greatest impact. As he drifted off to sleep, James heard the soft murmurs of the women outside the hut. He could not make out the words, but there was a tone of discussion, perhaps about him. He wondered if they were planning something, but he decided not to worry. The night was peaceful, the fire crackling softly, and for the first time in days he felt truly safe. The following morning, James awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the cracks in the hut's walls. The women were already awake, preparing for the day. He could hear the sound of water being drawn from a well, herbs being chopped, and gentle humming. Maya came to him with a cup of warm herbal tea, which he accepted gratefully. The drink was soothing, warming his tired body from the inside out. As he sipped, he noticed the quiet efficiency with which the women moved. Each task seemed to flow seamlessly into the next, a silent dance of cooperation and understanding. James realized that living in this hut, even for a short time, would be a learning experience. There was a rhythm here, a sense of order and community that he had rarely encountered. The women, though widows, were not weak or defeated. Instead, they carried themselves with dignity and strength, their lives marked by resilience and self-reliance. Over breakfast, the women shared stories of their village, their families, and the traditions they followed. James listened attentively, fascinated by their way of life. It was different from anything he had known, yet it felt genuine and grounded. The women spoke of loss, hardship, and survival, but also of laughter, friendship, and hope. James realized that in their world, life was not just about surviving, but about creating meaning and connection in every moment. As the morning sun climbed higher, James prepared to continue his journey. However, the three women insisted that he stay a little longer to rest, to regain his strength, and perhaps to learn more about their lives. James hesitated, torn between his need to move forward and the unexpected comfort of the village. Something about these women, their kindness, and their resilience made him reconsider his plans. By the time the sun reached its peak, James decided to stay, at least for a few more days. He was curious about the women and the village, but more importantly, he realized that he needed to recover both physically and mentally. The desert had tested him, and this unexpected sanctuary offered him a chance to regain his strength and perspective. Little did James know, this brief encounter with the three widows would mark the beginning of a remarkable chapter in his life, one that would challenge his ideas about family, love, and community. He had arrived seeking only a place to sleep, but the village and its inhabitants had other plans. Plans that would slowly, carefully, and unexpectedly draw him into a life he could never have imagined. That night, as James lay near the fire again, he thought about the vast desert he had crossed and the journey that still lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. Here in this humble hut, surrounded by three remarkable women, he realized that sometimes life offers more than we expect, not in wealth or comfort, but in human connection, kindness, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. And as he drifted into a deep sleep, the soft whispers of Maya, Lena, and Tear outside the hut seemed to linger in his dreams, hinting at the strange, unexpected adventure that was just beginning. The next morning, James awoke to a gentle warmth filling the hut. Sunlight poured through the cracks in the walls, illuminating the simple, cozy interior. The fire from the previous night had long since died down, leaving a soft smell of smoke that mingled with the scent of herbs drying on the shelves. Outside, the desert was beginning to wake. Birds chirped faintly, and the distant hum of wind through the cliffs reminded him just how remote this place was. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from the long walk the day before. Despite the weariness, there was a strange sense of calm in him, a feeling that perhaps he had finally found a moment of rest. As he prepared to stand, Maya entered the room carrying a small bundle of fresh herbs and a wooden bowl filled with water. Her expression was calm but curious, and her eyes seemed to measure him not in suspicion but in quiet interest. "Good morning," she said softly, setting the herbs and bowl on the small wooden table. "I hope you slept well. The night can be harsh here, but it seems you managed fine." James smiled, grateful for her kindness. "Yes, thank you. I feel much better today," he replied, his voice hoarse from the long journey. Just then Lena appeared in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes bright and lively. She carried a basket of freshly gathered fruit. "You will need something to eat," she said, her tone both firm and playful. "Traveling through the desert can take more out of a man than he realizes." James accepted the fruit with a grateful nod. The two women worked together with quiet efficiency, preparing a simple breakfast of bread, fruit, and herbal tea. Taya, the third widow, emerged from a corner of the hut where she had been quietly arranging small trinkets and tools. She was calm and serene, her presence adding a sense of balance to the room. She smiled gently at James and offered him a seat at the table. As he ate, James observed the three women. Despite their shared losses, there was a lightness to them, a playful energy beneath the surface that made the hut feel alive. They moved with purpose, each knowing her role, yet there was no rigidity. Their movements were coordinated naturally, as if they had lived together for years, understanding each other without words. After breakfast, Maya suggested that James accompany them on a walk through the village. James agreed, curious to see the place he had stumbled upon and to learn more about the people who had shown him such unexpected kindness. As they stepped outside, the desert air hit him with a fresh, cool breeze. The village was small but vibrant. Huts similar to the one he had stayed in were scattered around, with narrow paths winding between them. The women moved with ease through the space, greeting neighbors with smiles and nods. James noticed the subtle differences in the daily life of the villagers compared to the towns he had traveled through. Here, there was a sense of community and self-sufficiency. People worked together, sharing tasks and supporting each other in ways he had rarely seen before. Children played near the huts, laughing and running freely, while older villagers tended to gardens or repaired tools. Despite the harshness of the desert environment, life here seemed purposeful and full of quiet joy. As they walked, the women spoke to James, sharing bits of their lives and the history of the village. Maya explained how the village had been established generations ago and how the people had learned to survive in such a challenging environment. Lena added stories of her own childhood, the traditions she had grown up with, and the lessons her late husband had taught her. Taya spoke less often, but when she did, her words were thoughtful, offering insight and wisdom that hinted at a deep understanding of life and human nature. James listened attentively, fascinated by their stories. He realized that each woman had faced challenges he could barely imagine, yet they carried themselves with strength and dignity. They spoke openly about their losses without bitterness, showing a resilience that impressed him deeply. As he walked beside them, he felt a growing admiration for their courage and a sense of humility about his own life and struggles. The women also began to observe James closely, not in a judgmental way, but with genuine curiosity. They noticed how he treated the villagers he encountered, how he helped a child untangle a rope, or offered assistance to an elderly woman carrying a heavy bundle. His actions were small, but they revealed a kind heart and a respectful nature. The widows exchanged subtle glances, their silent communication hinting at discussions they would have later. By midday, they returned to the hut, and James helped with some of the daily chores. He fetched water from the well, carried firewood, and assisted with preparing a midday meal. The women guided him patiently, showing him the traditional ways of handling each task. James struggled at first, but their encouragement and gentle corrections helped him improve quickly. He began to feel a sense of belonging, a rare comfort in a world where he had always been a wanderer. As the afternoon sun blazed down, the three widows invited James to rest while they attended to other tasks. He lay down on the mat, watching the dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through the window. His mind wandered, reflecting on the past few days of his journey. He had expected nothing more than a place to sleep, yet he had found a sanctuary filled with remarkable people who had welcomed him without hesitation. The thought both overwhelmed and humbled him. Later, Maya returned to the mat, sitting quietly beside him. She spoke softly, asking about his travels, his family, and his experiences. James answered honestly, sharing tales of hardship, moments of joy, and lessons learned on the road. Maya listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that made him think more deeply about his choices and the life he had led so far. There was a gentle curiosity in her eyes, a desire to understand him not just as a traveler, but as a person with a story worth knowing. As the evening approached, the widows gathered around the fire once more. They shared a simple meal together, laughter filling the hut as they exchanged stories and playful remarks. James felt a warmth that went beyond the fire, a sense of connection he had not known for years. The three women had created a space where he could relax, be himself, and feel safe, a rare gift for someone who had spent so long moving through the world alone. That night, as James lay down to sleep again, he reflected on the day. The widows had shown him patience, kindness, and generosity, not just in providing shelter but in welcoming him into their lives, even if only temporarily. He felt a growing respect for them, a realization that these women were not defined by loss or hardship, but by strength, wisdom, and resilience. In the quiet hours before sleep, James could hear the soft sounds of the village outside, the distant laughter of children, the rustle of animals, and the murmured conversations of the villagers. He realized that life here was different from anything he had known, yet it was rich in its simplicity, and grounded in a sense of community he had long forgotten existed. As he drifted into sleep, he could not help but wonder about the three women who had so unexpectedly entered his life. Their kindness had been simple yet profound, and he felt a deep curiosity about their intentions and their thoughts. There was a spark of something unusual in their behavior, a subtle energy that suggested life in this village was about to become more complicated and more extraordinary than he could have imagined. For the first time in many years, James felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The desert, with all its challenges, had led him here for a reason. And though he did not yet understand what that reason was, he felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come, knowing that this encounter was only the beginning of a story far larger than himself. As the night deepened, James realized that his journey had changed. What began as a search for a simple place to sleep had turned into an immersion into a world of culture, resilience, and human connection. The three widows, with their strength, curiosity, and quiet intelligence, had opened a door into a life he had never imagined. And as he closed his eyes, he knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and perhaps new surprises that would test everything he thought he knew about trust, friendship, and the unexpected ways life could unfold. Days passed, and James began to feel more at home. In the small Apache village, the harshness of the desert seemed less intimidating now, softened by the presence of the three widows and the sense of community around him. Each day brought new tasks, new lessons, and a deeper understanding of the rhythm of life in the village. James helped gather firewood, fetch water, and tend to small gardens. The work was physically demanding, but it gave him a sense of purpose and connection he had not experienced in years of wandering. The three widows, Maya, Lena, and Taya, watched him closely, studying his every move. Their curiosity had grown into a quiet fascination. James was polite, considerate, and genuinely willing to learn. He treated their traditions with respect and approached each task with patience, even when the work was unfamiliar or tiring. The widows exchanged subtle glances during the day, communicating in silent ways they had developed over the years. It was clear that they were beginning to see him as more than just a traveler passing through. One afternoon, after helping repair a broken fence near the edge of the village, James returned to the hut to find the three women sitting together, speaking quietly. As he approached, Maya looked up and smiled. "We were hoping to talk with you," she said. Her tone was calm, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that caught James off guard. Lena and Taya nodded, their expressions expectant yet gentle. James sat down cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Of course," he replied. "What is it?" Maya took a deep breath and began to explain. "We have been talking about you," she said. "You are kind, strong, and respectful. You have helped us and shown care for our village and our people. We feel that you could bring stability and companionship to our lives." James blinked, confused. I don't understand," he said. "I am just a traveler. I only came here because I needed a place to rest." "I never expected," he trailed off, struggling to find the right words. Lena leaned forward, her dark eyes shining. "We know, James, we understand that, but we also know what we want. We have lost our husbands and lived alone for many years. Life is hard, and we believe that together with you, we can create something stronger, something supportive for all of us." Taya, who had been quiet until now, spoke softly. "We are not asking you to decide right away. We only want you to consider our proposal. We are not asking for a traditional marriage, as you may know it. We are asking for partnership, companionship, and mutual respect. We want to share our lives with you, as we have shared our lives with each other." James felt a mix of surprise, confusion, and disbelief. He had expected hospitality, kindness, perhaps even friendship, but never this. Three widows were offering him a place in their lives, not as a visitor, but as a partner in a way he had never imagined. He struggled to process the idea. It was unusual, even by the standards of the diverse communities he had passed through. I don't know what to say," he admitted finally. "This is unexpected. I came here to sleep, to rest, and now you are asking me to be part of your lives?" Maya nodded gently. Yes, we understand if it is difficult to comprehend, but we have discussed this among ourselves and we believe it could work. We are strong women. We can share responsibilities and support each other. We do not want to compete or fight over you. We only want a life together that is balanced and respectful. James leaned back, taking a deep breath. He thought about the days he had spent in the village, the kindness of the widows, their strength, and the sense of community they had introduced him to. He realized that he felt a growing respect and admiration for them, even if he was not yet ready to fully understand their proposal. "Can I have some time to think?" he asked finally. "I need to understand what this would mean. It is not something I expected, and I need to consider it carefully." The three women nodded. "Of course," Lena said. "We are not in a hurry. Take the time you need. We only ask that you remain honest with yourself and with us." Over the next few days, James observed the widows in their daily routines. He watched the way they cared for each other, shared responsibilities, and maintained harmony in their home. It was not easy. There were disagreements, small tensions, and moments of frustration, but they navigated these challenges with patience and understanding. He began to realize that their proposal was not born out of desperation or whimsy. It was a thoughtful plan based on trust, respect, and practicality. James also began to reflect on his own life. For years, he had moved from place to place, never staying long enough to form deep connections. He had avoided responsibility and intimacy because he feared getting hurt or tied down. Yet here, in this small desert village, he saw a different way of living. A way where care, cooperation, and mutual respect created strength and stability. One evening, as the sun set behind the cliffs, James sat with Maya, Lena, and Taya around the fire. The air was cool, and the sky glowed with shades of pink and orange. The women spoke softly about their hopes, dreams, and fears. They shared memories of their late husbands, stories of the past, and the lessons they had learned from life. James listened intently, realizing that these women were more than widows. They were wise, resourceful, and resilient individuals who had faced life's challenges with courage. Lena smiled at him. "You have been with us for a few days now, James. You have seen our lives, our routines, our joys and struggles. We do not want to force you, but we hope you can see why we believe this could work. Life is difficult in this village, but together we can make it easier, richer, and more meaningful." James looked into the fire, thinking deeply. He felt the warmth of their presence, the sincerity of their words, and the strange pull of something he could not yet name. He realized that his journey had brought him to a place where he could not only rest his body, but also find a sense of belonging. As the night grew darker, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. The women laughed softly, teasing each other and James in gentle ways. The sound was comforting, filling the hut with life and warmth. James found himself smiling, feeling an unfamiliar sense of contentment. He began to imagine what it would be like to share his days with them, not just as a guest, but as someone who contributed to their lives, who supported them, and who was, in turn, supported. By the next morning, James had made a decision. He would not accept or reject the proposal immediately, but he would stay in the village, learn more about the women, and see if a life together was possible. He realized that whatever happened, this experience was changing him. He was learning patience, humility, and the value of human connection in a way he had never known. Over the following days, James continued to help with daily tasks while spending time with the widows. He learned to cook simple meals, gather herbs, and mend small tools. The widows taught him not only practical skills, but also the importance of cooperation, empathy, and understanding. James began to appreciate their intelligence, humor, and resilience. He noticed how each woman had a unique way of approaching life. Maya was nurturing and protective, Lena was bold and adventurous, and Taya was calm and wise. Their differences created balance, and James began to see that he could contribute to this balance in his own way. Slowly, the fear and confusion he had felt at their proposal began to fade. He realized that their offer was not about control or power, but about partnership, respect, and mutual care. The widows were not asking him to give up his freedom, but to share it with them in a way that strengthened all of their lives. One evening, as they watched the stars from the edge of the village, James felt a sense of peace he had not known for years. The vast desert stretched before him, but the village, the widows, and the small home they had built together felt like a sanctuary. He knew that the decision he faced was unusual and complex, but he also understood that life often presented opportunities that were unexpected and transformative. James realized that the widow's proposal was not just about him. It was about all of them creating a life together that was stronger, more meaningful, and full of purpose. He felt a sense of responsibility, not pressure, and a growing desire to explore what this unusual path could bring. He understood that accepting their offer would not be easy, but he also knew that life rarely offered second chances at connection, trust, and belonging. As he lay down to sleep that night, James reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this desert village. What had begun as a simple search for shelter had turned into an encounter that would challenge his ideas about family, love, and partnership. He felt a quiet anticipation, knowing that the days ahead would test him, teach him, and perhaps lead him into a life he could never have imagined. The desert night was calm, and the soft sounds of the village lulled him into a deep, thoughtful sleep. He dreamt of firelight, laughter, and the three women who had unexpectedly become central to his life. He did not know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he felt that he was exactly where he needed to be, on the edge of a remarkable journey that would change him forever. James had now been in the village for several weeks, and the initial shock of the widow's proposal had faded into a growing sense of curiosity and cautious acceptance. He had spent enough time with Maya, Lena, and Taya to see the depth of their resilience, intelligence, and kindness. Every day, he discovered new layers to their personalities and new lessons about life in a community that relied on cooperation, respect, and trust. Life in the village was far from easy. The desert could be harsh, and resources were limited, but the three women had developed a rhythm that allowed them to manage their household, maintain their gardens, and care for the children of the village. James found himself slowly integrating into this routine. At first, he had worried about how he would fit into their lives, but he soon realized that his contributions, however small, were appreciated and even necessary. Maya often guided him through tasks that required patience and attention to detail. She taught him how to tend to the small herb garden, explaining which plants could be used for food, medicine, or tea. Her gentle instruction and clear explanations made him feel capable, even when the work was unfamiliar. He admired her nurturing nature and the way she seemed to know intuitively how to organize the household and care for everyone in it. Lena, on the other hand, introduced him to the more adventurous aspects of village life. She showed him how to climb the rocky hills to gather firewood, how to track small animals for food, and how to make simple repairs to the huts and fences. Her energy was infectious, and James often found himself smiling at her boldness and resourcefulness. She had a way of challenging him, pushing him to be stronger and braver, but always with encouragement and laughter. Taya was different still. She was calm, wise, and reflective. She often spent time with James discussing life, philosophy, and the subtle lessons of human behavior. Her words were soft but powerful, helping him understand the dynamics of the village, the widow, intentions, and the balance they maintained in their lives. She taught him patience, the value of listening, and the importance of understanding others' perspectives before making decisions. Together, the three women and James formed a unique team. They shared responsibilities and worked together to create harmony, even when disagreements arose. James was surprised by how smoothly they operated as a unit, balancing differences in personality and approach. The widows had clearly learned over the years how to manage conflict, and James quickly learned that his role was not to control or dominate, but to contribute, support, and respect their leadership. As days turned into weeks, James began to notice changes within himself. He felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. For years, he had wandered alone, moving from town to town without forming deep connections. Now, he found himself caring deeply about the three women, the village, and the life they were building together. He admired the widow's strength, humor, and intelligence, and he realized that he wanted to be part of their lives in a meaningful way. One afternoon, while helping Lena repair a fence near the edge of the village, James paused to look out at the desert stretching endlessly before him. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows across the sand and rocks. He felt a sense of peace mixed with awe at the vastness of the world around him. Lena noticed his thoughtful expression and smiled. "You're quiet today," she said. "Thinking about your journey?" James nodded. I am. I've traveled so far, seen so much, but I've never experienced something like this. Life here, it's challenging, yes, but it also feels meaningful in a way I didn't expect. Lena laughed softly. That's because you're learning to see what we see. Life isn't just about surviving. It's about how we live together, support each other, and find joy even in small moments. You're part of that now, whether you realize it or not. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, James helped prepare the evening meal. The widows worked alongside him, each with her own approach and style. Maya carefully tended the fire and organized the ingredients. Lena chopped vegetables with practiced skill, and Taya quietly supervised, offering guidance when needed. James felt a sense of pride as he realized he could contribute in a meaningful way, even if he was still learning the best methods. After dinner, they gathered around the fire to share stories and laughter. The children of the village joined them, bringing their energy and joy to the small circle. James found himself laughing freely, enjoying the simple pleasures of community and connection. He began to understand that this unusual arrangement was not about possession or control, but about mutual respect, support, and the creation of a life filled with purpose and warmth. Over time, James also began to understand the widow's dynamics more deeply. Each woman had her own personality, her own way of expressing care and affection, and her own unique strengths. Maya's nurturing nature provided stability, Lena's adventurous spirit brought excitement, and Taya's calm wisdom offered guidance. Together, they formed a balanced and harmonious household, and James realized that he could find his place within this balance by offering his own strengths and support. There were challenges, of course. Not every day was easy, and disagreements sometimes arose. A miscommunication about chores, a difference in opinion about how to handle a small problem in the village, or even minor frustrations with the children could create tension. But the widows handled these situations with patience, discussion, and compromise. James learned from their example, understanding that harmony was not about avoiding conflict, but managing it with respect and understanding. One morning, while gathering water from the well, James reflected on how much he had changed since arriving in the village. He felt stronger, more capable, and more confident in himself. The widows had not only offered him shelter, but had also helped him rediscover his own abilities, his capacity for patience, and his understanding of human connection. He realized that he was no longer just a traveler passing through. He was part of something larger, something meaningful, and something that required his dedication and care. As the weeks passed, James developed close bonds with each widow. He admired Maya's ability to manage the household with efficiency and compassion, appreciated Lena's boldness and sense of humor, and respected Taya's wisdom and guidance. Each interaction brought new insights and new experiences, deepening his understanding of life in the village and of the women themselves. James also noticed subtle changes in the widows. Their initial curiosity about him had evolved into genuine trust and respect. They relied on him, sought his opinion, and welcomed his help. They laughed at his mistakes, praised his efforts, and included him in decisions about daily life and village matters. It was a gradual process, but James felt the strength of the bond growing, built on shared experience, trust, and mutual understanding. One evening, as the village settled into quiet, James sat outside the hut, watching the stars emerge one by one. The desert air was cool and calm, and the soft sounds of the village, children playing quietly, the murmur of distant conversation, the crackle of a fire, created a sense of serenity. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the hardships he had endured, and the unexpected turn his life had taken. What had begun as a search for a place to sleep had transformed into a life filled with connection, purpose, and learning. James realized that life with the widows was unconventional, yes, but it was also rich and fulfilling. He had learned the value of cooperation, patience, and empathy. He had discovered strength in vulnerability and the importance of trust and respect in building relationships. And he knew that the days ahead would continue to challenge him, teach him, and shape him into someone stronger and wiser. As he drifted to sleep that night, surrounded by the quiet presence of Maya, Lena, and Taya, James felt a sense of gratitude he had rarely known. He was part of a unique, harmonious family bound not by tradition or expectation, but by respect, trust, and shared purpose. and though the future remained uncertain, he felt ready to face it, knowing that together they could create a life full of meaning, connection, and even joy in the most unexpected of places. Time passed, and James Carter had grown accustomed to life in the small desert village. What had begun as a brief stop for shelter had now transformed into a life of connection, responsibility, and discovery. The three widows, Maya, Lena, and Taya, had become central figures in his daily existence. Their companionship, guidance, and unique personalities had reshaped his understanding of family, community, and the meaning of home. James had long ago stopped thinking of himself as a mere visitor. Each day he woke with a sense of purpose, ready to contribute to the household, the village, and the lives of the women who had so generously welcomed him. He had learned the rhythms of the village, the needs of the land, and the tasks necessary to maintain a small but thriving home in the harsh desert environment. The widows had taught him not just survival skills, but also the importance of empathy, cooperation, and patience. Maya, with her nurturing and organized nature, continued to guide him in the daily workings of the household. She taught him how to prepare food efficiently, care for the small animals in their care, and manage resources so that nothing went to waste. Her calm, steady presence provided stability and reassurance. James admired her deeply, not only for her practical skills, but for her ability to lead with kindness and clarity. Lena remained the adventurous spirit in the group, often pushing James to explore new ways of approaching challenges. She taught him how to gather supplies from the rugged desert terrain, how to repair structures quickly and efficiently, and how to find creative solutions to unexpected problems. Her energy was infectious, and James found that even when he felt tired or frustrated, her enthusiasm encouraged him to keep going. Through her, he learned resilience, adaptability, and the joy of discovering his own capabilities. Taya, the quiet and wise member of the trio, continued to teach James lessons in patience, understanding, and reflection. She encouraged him to think deeply about the choices he made, the responsibilities he carried, and the relationships he nurtured. Her insights helped him navigate the complexities of living with three strong, independent women. Taya's calm guidance reminded James that true strength often came not from force, but from careful thought, empathy, and the ability to listen. As weeks turned into months, James found himself fully integrated into the lives of Maya, Lena, and Taya. The widows had shown him the value of balance in all things, between work and rest, seriousness and laughter, independence and cooperation. James contributed his own skills, offering support, carrying out tasks, and providing companionship and assistance wherever it was needed. Their lives were not without challenges, but together they had built a routine and a harmony that was both practical and fulfilling. The children of the village, who had once eyed James with curiosity, now treated him with affection and respect. They sought his help in small tasks, listened to his stories, and laughed at his jokes. James had discovered that the sense of family extended beyond the widows to the wider village community. In caring for the children and engaging with the other villagers, he felt a profound sense of purpose and belonging that he had never experienced during his years of wandering. One morning, as the sun rose over the cliffs and painted the desert in shades of gold, James walked with the widows to the nearby garden. Together, they tended to the herbs, vegetables, and small fruit trees, exchanging stories and laughter along the way. Maya showed him how to trim the plants carefully, Lena demonstrated a quicker method of gathering produce, and Taya explained the subtle ways the soil and weather affected growth. In these simple, everyday moments, James realized the depth of the bond he shared with the women. It was a connection built not on obligation, but on respect, trust, and shared effort. Evenings were the most cherished part of the day. The four of them, James and the three widows, would gather around the fire to share stories, discuss the day's events, or simply enjoy quiet companionship. They celebrated small victories, laughed at mistakes, and comforted each other during moments of frustration or fatigue. James had learned that life in the village was not just about survival. It was about creating meaning, connection, and joy in every possible moment. Over time, James began to notice subtle shifts in his own perspective. He had arrived in the village seeking only shelter, yet he now understood that he had been searching for something far greater: a sense of home, a sense of belonging, and a life filled with meaningful relationships. The widow's unusual proposal, which had initially seemed bewildering, now felt like an opportunity to create something rare and valuable, a partnership built on mutual respect, cooperation, and affection. The widows also adjusted their expectations and approach. They had initially been careful not to overwhelm him or pressure him into a decision. Now, they treated James as an equal, relying on him for advice, support, and companionship. Their interactions were marked by humor, trust, and an understanding of each other's boundaries. Each woman had a distinct personality, and yet their differences complemented one another, creating a harmonious household in which James could thrive. Challenges still arose, as they inevitably do in any household. There were disagreements about how to manage resources, minor conflicts over chores, and occasional frustrations with the unpredictability of village life. But these moments were handled with patience, discussion, and compromise. James learned that harmony was not the absence of conflict, but the ability to navigate it with respect, understanding, and empathy. Through these experiences, he gained confidence in his role within the household and deepened his appreciation for the women's strength and wisdom. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars and listened to the desert wind, James reflected on how far he had come. The vast desert, which had once seemed lonely and intimidating, now felt alive with possibility and connection. The village had become a sanctuary, and the three widows had become more than companions. They were teachers, friends, and guides. James felt a profound sense of gratitude for their presence in his life and the unexpected journey that had brought him here. He realized that his life had changed in ways he could never have anticipated. What had started as a simple quest for a place to sleep had evolved into a life rich with responsibility, learning, and connection. James had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He had learned the value of patience, the importance of cooperation, and the deep satisfaction that comes from contributing meaningfully to the lives of others. The widows, too, had grown alongside James. They had shared their lives with him not out of necessity, but out of trust, respect, and a desire to create a harmonious household. Together, they had built a life that was unconventional, yet deeply fulfilling. Their home was filled with laughter, learning, and a sense of purpose that extended beyond themselves to the village and the desert around them. As months turned into seasons, James felt a sense of permanence he had never known. He no longer thought of himself as a wanderer or outsider. He was part of a family, unconventional though it might be, that valued him, respected him, and relied on him. He had discovered the extraordinary potential of human connection, the beauty of shared responsibility, and the joy of living a life guided by respect, trust, and care. The story of James and the three widows became quietly known in the village. Neighbors admired the harmony they had created, the way they managed their household, and the respect they showed for each other. Though their arrangement was unconventional, it was not unusual to those who understood the values of cooperation, balance, and trust. The widows and James had found a way to live together in a manner that strengthened them all, a testament to adaptability, understanding, and the willingness to embrace life's unexpected paths. In the quiet moments, when James sat outside and gazed at the desert sky, he thought about how his life had changed. The search for a place to sleep had led him to a home, a family, and a life filled with meaning. He had discovered that sometimes the greatest opportunities in life come not from what we plan, but from what we find unexpectedly, when we open ourselves to trust, cooperation, and connection. James no longer felt alone. He had a purpose, a family, and a community. The three widows, each strong and independent, had shown him the power of partnership, the value of respect, and the richness of shared life. And in turn, James had found his place within their world, contributing in his own way, learning from them, and growing into a man capable of compassion, patience, and understanding. The days continued, filled with work, laughter, learning, and the quiet joys of everyday life. James had found the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sense of home, belonging, and partnership that he had longed for without even realizing it. The desert, once a vast expanse of loneliness and challenge, had become a place of life, connection, and growth. And so, James Carter embraced this unusual but remarkable life, understanding that happiness, trust, and family can be found in the most unexpected ways. He had arrived seeking only a place to sleep, yet he had found far more: a life of meaning, a home of love and respect, and the extraordinary companionship of three remarkable women who had forever changed the course of his journey.